I don't think it's always God's will to heal, even though I think the vast majority of the time it is God's will to heal. And the reason why I don't think it's always God's will to heal, I'll just go through some real quick, is that the Apostle Paul, on his way to Damascus, Jesus appears to him and Paul is blinded, apparently by the light of Jesus. It blinds his eyes. And then later, Ananias prays for him and says, Paul, receive your sight, and he's healed. So it seems like ultimately God's will was for Paul to be healed, but not until Paul repented and turned to Jesus and radically shifted his life and became the instrument to the Gentiles and the most radical evangelist for Christianity that like we've ever known. Remember, this is in the New Testament. Okay, I'm not quoting Old Testament passages right now because there's charismatics out there that always say, well, you're just quoting Old Testament passages when you say it's not always God's will to heal. No, I'm talking about New Testament passages on this side of the cross. And if whether you believe healing is in the atonement or not, I mean, Jesus paid for Paul uh, for his healing, right? Well, why did Jesus give him blindness? In that moment when he blinded him, we can't say it was God's will for him to be healed because Jesus is God and he literally made Paul blind. So we need to struggle with these passages and not ignore them, even though they're rare. I believe it's rare occurrences in the Bible where God is giving people sickness, or Ananias and Sapphira, just God strikes them dead, apparently because they withheld an offering from the Lord and they lied about it. Bar Jesus, that sorcerer who was saying mean things to Paul when they were trying to preach, um, Paul tells Bar Jesus, the Lord's hand is against you. In that moment, when he says the Lord's hand is against you, is it God's will for Bar Jesus to be healed? I don't think so. He became blind for a time after that. Paul basically uh, somehow prayed that, Bar Jesus would be blinded. Um, Again, like it seems like it's not that simple to just say it's always God's will to heal when Paul tells Bar Jesus, the Lord's hand is against you, at least in that moment. Another one is 1 Corinthians 11. Paul is talking about how the Corinthians were getting drunk on communion, being really irreverent with the Lord's table. And he says that's why some of you have gotten weak and ill and even dying. And it's implied that, like, the Lord was making weak and giving sickness and killing some of the Corinthians who were just not treating the Lord's table reverently. And it reminds me of when Uzzah reached out and touched the Ark of the Covenant and got struck dead. The problem is when we say it's always God's will that someone's sick, or it's always God's will to heal. What I'm trying to show is that there's a balance here. I think most of the time it is God's will to heal, but not quite all of the time. If you say it's always God's will to heal, please clarify you mean ultimately it's God's will to heal, and ultimately it's God's will to reconcile everything to himself, right? We agree with that. But we need to have in our understanding the fact that God can give people sickness if he wants, and that he has the capacity to do so, and to use sickness for a redemptive purpose. I hear some charismatics groaning and being like, oh, you're being so religious and legalistic. Guys, remember, I'm a continuationist. I'm for the spiritual gifts being practiced today, just like it was in the early church, and miracles today happening just like it was in the early church. And I want to remind everybody that when we talk about is it always God's will to heal, we're not having a continuationism, cessationism debate. We're not saying, is it God's will to heal today? Of course it's God's will to heal today, y'all. Of course. Like, we can have that continuation and cessationism debate. Um, I mean, look at the spiritual gifts, like at the end of 1 Corinthians 12, and look how they're intertwined. Like you have the gifts that are for the a cessationist would think are for today, like evangelism and administration and teaching. they're intermixed with miracles and tongues and prophets and apostles. It's all, if you cut them out, you're like pulling a Thomas Jefferson. If you cut out what cessationists would call the sign gifts, they're all spiritual gifts, y'all, and it's all together. So, okay, we can have the discussion, but what we're talking about right now is um, whether or not, either if you're a cessationist or continuationist, regardless, is it always God's will to heal in every circumstance, 100% of the time? And so, as we saw in the scriptures I told you about, no, it's not quite always God's will to heal. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I want to hear your thoughts. I want to just keep discussing with you, keep learning with you. Make sure to share this video with your friends if you found it helpful. Thank you guys so much. Take care.